Okay, today we got my 84 ramcharger in the shop. I was tinkering with it a little bit last night off camera, and I got the horn to work, which is great, but the steering leaves a lot to be desired. It just wanders a good bit, and I think part of the reason why is that right there. This was the slip joint back in the old Dodge days that used to, you know, the idea is this shaft here slides in and out of this collar, and it's held in by said roll pin right here. What I'd like to do is, if I can't rebuild this into something a little better, we're going to see if I can do that. I got an old steering shaft out of an XJ Cherokee that might work. We will just rebuild this, repack it with grease, call it done. The rebuild kit for this is like 11 bucks, so I'm not too worried about it. I know I could go with like a Barg Warner type deal, but we're not going to. And then if that doesn't tighten it up enough, we'll go in and I'll show you how to tighten up the gears on a steering gearbox. This works for most older steering gearboxes. I'd say like 2000 and older. It involves that nut and the stud. I already did it once before, and it seems to have still some slop in it. I mean, the whole thing's moving before the steering shaft engages, but not a whole lot. But the fact that I can do this, wiggle, 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 I don't think is very good. So first thing we're going to do is coat everything with PB Blaster. We're going to knock out that roll pin, take the rag joint apart up top, which, for those of you that don't know, that right there is a rag joint. They call it that because it used to be made of actual rag material, I believe, way back in the day. But you buzz 2 bolts out on either side, and that whole thing pops out. And we'll see where we end up at the end of this. Okay, we're going to get to it. First thing first, soak everything down with PB Blaster. Please excuse my wiring mess. I know it's not loomed very well, but I've been doing a lot of wiring diagnostics. This truck almost burnt to the ground when I first got it, but now I got everything working except for the radio. Radio doesn't work. Tack works, gauges work, key works, lights work, windshield washers work, but it's been a lot of electrical troubleshooting. This truck was owned by somebody that really knew what they were doing for a while, and then owned by somebody who really had no idea what they were doing for a very long while. Anyway, let's get to it. Well, there you have it. This is the steering shaft, and it goes into this collar. And the one thing I learned is, if you ever do this on your own, you do not have to remove this collar. I repeat, you do not have to remove this collar. You hear me? You do not. But if you do end up removing it, drive a roll pin out. Mine had this plastic stuff in it. I'm not sure what that did, but I drove the roll pin out, and then I undid my rag joint, and I lifted my rag joint at enough play to get it up and over the steering column part, and then I slid this end out. And what this does is, I got this other steering shaft here. This is off of a newer XJ Wrangler. Hold on one sec. And what it has is called this slip joint here, and it allows the steering shaft to move in and out. Now, modern ones are also designed for impact, so if you were to crash into this Jeep from the front, the steering shaft could move, you know, what, like probably about 12 inches. I don't have it fully extended there, but probably about 12 inches before the steering wheel starts to come back at you. They weren't really thinking about that here, but they were thinking about isolating the steering column from the rest of the truck, mostly for vibration and comfort, I think. So this slides in and out of there. And a lot of times whenever you have a lot of slop in your steering, it's these, you can't really tell, but there's a set of like square bushings on there, and they slide in that keyway, top and bottom. And then there's a spring clip in the middle that pushes them out. And with that spring clip pushing them out, it makes everything nice and tight, and after a while these bushings will start to wear on the edges and get all wobbly and cattywampus. Now, I still have play in my steering box. It wiggles just a little bit more than I'd like. It's actually not really horribly bad, but it's just more than I care to have. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to try to set my camera up down here, is show you how to adjust for play in your steering box using that nut right there and a 3/16 Allen wrench. Okay, here we go. Alright, I've already got my wrench on, and I'll show you this from the bottom because it's the easiest way I can think to show you so you can see what exactly I'm doing. Then I'll give you a view from the top again. But what you want to do is take this nut and crack it loose. I've already actually cracked this one loose a little bit. And then while you're holding it, put your 3/16 Allen wrench in there. Mine's on a ratchet. And then you're going to want to tighten it down as tight as you can get it. But that's about as snug as it's going to get. And while you're holding pressure against it, you're going to tighten your nut back up. And that's how you take the adjustment out of the steering box. And what you're doing is you're actually pushing two gears together. You're pushing a spur gear on the top. And there it is from the top side. You can see the jam nut holding the stud. The stud has the Allen head in it. It's a 3/16 Allen head. And what you do is, like I said, you loosen up that jam nut and then you tighten up that set. It's like basically like a set screw, and it just screws down into that nut. Then you got to hold tension against it as you tighten the nut back up, and that pushes a gear down against another gear, as tight as you can to take all the slop out. Alright, so here's what we got. Basically the end of the steering shaft is, in the end of the shaft there is a hole for a pin. This is that pin. That pin is driven into that shaft about halfway. And then what you have around the pin and the shaft is called the spring clip. And there's my spring clip. Okay, and then around the spring clip you got these spacers. And they fit in that keyway in the axle. Like such. Okay. And this rides back and forth on the end here as the body and chassis flex and move opposite of each other. Now, there's also this here clip and this seal. I use the seal to wipe most of the grease off. But this seal and clip will go over the end of that shaft, and they will hold the grease. Oops, sorry, bumped the camera there. Sorry. The grease inside of here. Now I went ahead and put this back on. Time will tell if that was a wise decision or not. it was just really hard to get this pin lined up, and I think it'd be easier to slide everything in and then either lift or drop it down. Either lift, like start over here and then lift it up, or start high and then drop the other end down to get the rag joint attached. And then I can come back in here and peen over the, well, peen over the seal and this whirligig doodad. But I gotta run to the parts store to pick up my parts. It was $11 worth of parts. I sprayed some white lithium grease, as you can see, on the splines, just in case I do gotta take it back off. It'd be that much easier to remove, because, you know, only, in my opinion, only a complete idiot would tear something apart and put it back together with the idea in his head that he'd never have to take it back apart again. But I mean, there's still a little play in the gearbox, but it doesn't feel as loose. I mean, there's just a little bit of wiggle to it, which I don't think is too bad. We'll see what the guy who inspects this truck thinks, because that's what I'm getting this thing ready for, is to go in for an inspection. But yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at, and that's pretty much where I'm gonna leave it right now. So I'm gonna run into town. I'll give you a holler when I'm done. So here's your new kit. It's the numbers from Napa, and what comes in it is we got the new seal with the new metal ring. There's your spring clip. There's your little feet. I don't know what you call them. It even came with a new roll pin, even though I already reused the other one. There's the pin for in the shaft. So let's throw that all in there, shall we? Alright, so it's worth noting that whenever you assemble this, there's a pin. Put the pin in first. Don't worry about getting it exactly squared or centered up, but close enough. Eyeball it up. And then what I had to do is I put one on first, and it took a little bit of work, a couple light taps from the persuader, because this is a pretty close fit. And then I put the spring clip in, and then I hooked it over the other side, and then I added this one with a couple light taps. First time I put this together, I put both sides on and then tried to slide the spring clip in between, but there's not enough room. And, you know, now it's got some, well, as you can see, it's got some spring to it. But let's see if we can get that back together and get it in the truck. As I try to figure out a way. Alright, I didn't film it because I thought it was going to end up stupid and go really wrong. But what I ended up doing was taking my ball peen hammer and with the peen of it just tapping that spring as I held pressure with this hand. I tap, 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 and that sucker slid right in. Yep, so it's in there now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and snug up the rag joint up top and pack that sucker a little bit more full of grease, tap the seal on, and call her done, and then give her a test drive. Alright, not real sure if I made things, oops, sorry, I gotta quit bumping the camera, a whole bunch better or not, but I fixed what I could. There's still slop in the steering in this thing. I made it better. It's definitely better than it was. There's no doubt in my mind. But you gotta remember, this truck's, what is it? It's a 84, which makes it like 35 years old. And the steering technology back in was not anything spectacular. My Silverado's got a lot more responsive steering, but it's also got rack and pinion steering. And rack and pinion steering is a whole lot different than what we got going on here. So, without further ado, now that I've packed that sucker full of grease, and then I take this guy, push him down on nice and tight. I can take this guy and push him on nice and tight, and then I can take my hammer and just kind of, well, let's put it this way. You're in my way, camera. I'm gonna have to peen those tabs over, and I got the tires up off the ground, so spinning the steering column around shouldn't be a big deal. But that's it. Those are the steps. It should make things better for you. Don't expect perfection, especially if you're dealing with something like this. If you want perfection, you know, look for different components or a newer truck. You know what I mean? But for what Clampy is, this has been perfect. So, this is me signing off. Good night. Alright, as part of my I'm Not Too Embarrassed to Share Anything series, I'm showing you my zip tie seal repair. Well, it's not really a repair, it's just helping hold it on. Those tabs, even bent over, are a pain. Maybe I should have pre-bent them, but anyway, I don't have a whole lot of faith in them staying there very long. The old one, as you'd seen, it wore off. So I have placed zip ties, and the only thing those zip ties are doing is holding the seal kind of in place. They're not really, they're not physically holding the steering shaft together or anything like that. Don't get me that wrong. It just, the old seal had rolled, that plate had worn off and had rolled up, and then water and everything got in there, and that's part of the reason why I replaced it all. That, and it was cheap. It was only, this is only like a $12 repair, but it looks funny, but it's functional. Alright, that's it. Peace. Well, I gotta say this. First off, it's very loud in here. But second off is, it's definitely improved. Is this a muscle car? Is this a sports car? Does it corner? Not so much. You still use a lot of steering input. There's still a lot of hunt in the tires as they kind of find and grab. But, I mean, come on. It's a 1984 Ramcharger rolling on 35s. I mean, what do you want? So, every time I move the steering wheel, yes, the direction of the truck changes. Absolutely. It changes so smooth now. It used to be I constantly did this. Now, if I do that, I constantly was seesawing the steering wheel. Now, if I do that, I'll be seesawing the whole truck. So, it's definitely much improved. And this truck's not perfect. Don't ever take that away from it. It's not perfect. There's a million things wrong with it. But it is a blast. It's absolutely a blast to drive. It's absolutely a blast to own. It turns heads when you pull it into a parking lot, and you know, I've got like $2 grand invested total. Will I invest more? Absolutely. My son named this truck, Fred Williams does dirt every day, and he named his first project truck that he owned Clampy, and that's what George tended to call this one, Clampy. So Clampy's going to live for a very, very long time, and we're going to continue making it better. I'm going to continue making videos about making it better, and we'll continue having fun. Alright, I cannot shift and video record, so I'm going to put you guys down, downshift, and have fun. Alright, bye.